You arrive at the castle gates just as the sun dips behind the hills. The towering stone walls stretch upward, casting long shadows that spill over the frost-covered ground. At first, the sight is majestic, storybook even. The drawbridge creaks as it lowers, groaning under its own weight, and you cross it with the cautious awe of someone stepping into history. You might have imagined banners fluttering in the wind, a royal welcome, perhaps even a roaring hearth waiting to greet you. But what actually awaits is far less romantic. As you step past the portcullis, you notice the air shifts. It's colder inside the walls than out. Your breath fogs instantly, and even through your cloak, the damp chill seems to climb your spine. The ground beneath your feet is uneven, a patchwork of mud, trampled straw, and scattered stones. The air smells faintly of wood smoke, animal dung, and old wet stone. A combination you wouldn't have guessed could exist, let alone persist. You're greeted not by music or warmth, but by the dull clatter of boots and muttering voices. A guard nods at you, but he doesn't smile. No one seems particularly interested that you're here, as if new arrivals are just another chore on a long, cold day. You look around for a stable or a place to shake the cold from your limbs, but no one offers directions. So you keep walking, deeper into the inner courtyard, your boots crunching over frozen dirt. The buildings that make up the inner bailey are squat and sturdy, as though they were designed to keep out anything pleasant. You pass the blacksmith's forge, silent now, the fire smothered, and then the kitchens, which reek of boiled onions and rancid grease. There's no illusion of luxury here. The people who live in this castle look tired. Their hands are red from scrubbing or carrying or chopping or just the cold. Their clothes are stiff and worn. Their faces are pale and dry, cracked at the edges from the wind. At last, a steward, his robes less fine than you'd expected, motions you toward the main keep. You follow him up a steep flight of stone steps that are slick from melted snow and poorly lit. Every footfall echoes. The castle may be built to last centuries, but the echoes make it feel eerily hollow, like it's been abandoned for years. Inside the main hall, your eyes take a moment to adjust. The ceiling is high, supported by thick wooden beams, and a few narrow windows offer a weak, gray light. A fire smolders in a large hearth along one wall, but it does little to warm the vast space. You notice that only a few people linger here, huddled near the fire or shuffling silently across the room. Their breath still fogs in the air, even indoors. You find a corner to stand in just long enough to gather your thoughts. Already the cold is gnawing at your toes. You'd hoped for something more inviting, but it's becoming clear. This isn't a place designed for comfort. This is a structure meant to defend, to withstand siege and storm alike. It's thick-walled, hard-edged, and unapologetically practical. The steward leaves you without ceremony, disappearing down another corridor. You glance around, trying to get a sense of where you are, what this place really is. There are no tapestries, no music, no laughter echoing through halls. Only a thin draft whispering through the cracks in the stone and the shiver that won't leave your shoulders. It strikes you suddenly and deeply that people actually live their entire lives like this. Day after day, year after year, inside this freezing fortress. Not kings and queens of fantasy novels, but cooks, soldiers, scribes, children. And they weren't pretending. You walk slowly across the room, the soles of your shoes scraping softly against the stone floor. You pass a table covered in crumbs and gnawed bones, a few splinters of dried wood, a wooden bench that looks ready to splinter beneath its own weight. There's a dampness to everything. The walls, the benches, even the air. The kind of damp tea. You follow a dim corridor leading away from the hall, the stone walls closing in tightly around you. It's hard to tell whether the chill is coming from the air or seeping directly from the stones themselves. Every inch of the place seems to exhale cold. You run your fingers along the rough surface of the wall. It's damp, slick with condensation. No matter where you step, the air clings to your skin like a wet sheet. There's no central heating here, of course. The idea of warmth, as you understand it, doesn't really exist. The fire in the great hall, distant and weak, was the best it gets. Beyond that, there are only scattered fireplaces tucked into rooms that barely hold the heat for more than a few steps. Most corridors, stairwells, and chambers remain untouched by fire. You're learning quickly. In this castle, every wall is a refrigerator. You make your way upstairs, toward the sleeping quarters. The steps are steep and uneven, carved from stone and polished smooth by centuries of feet. You wrap your cloak tighter, but the wind finds you anyway. It snakes under the heavy wooden doors, whistles through keyholes, and trickles between floorboards and arrow slits. You stop beside one of these tiny windows, just wide enough to fit your hand through. The wind that rushes past your face is sharp enough to make your eyes water. You close the shutter again and realize there's no glass, just a slab of wood held in place by a rusted iron latch. When you finally reach the chamber where guests would sleep, it's not much of a relief. The room is little more than a stone box with a bed tucked in the corner, its wooden frame groaning with age. The mattress is made of straw, lumpy and uneven, and smells faintly of mildew. A single wool blanket lies folded at the foot, but it's thin and scratchy. You sit down carefully, and the bed creaks in protest. There's a fireplace here, but it's empty. No coals, no wood, not even ash. Just a cold cavity in the wall where heat should be. You kneel to peer inside and discover it doesn't even connect to the main chimney. It's decorative. Or maybe it was functional once, centuries ago. Now it's just a reminder of what you wake up. Or rather, you stop pretending to sleep. Your body is sore from the straw-stuffed mattress. Your shoulders tense from curling tightly under the scratchy blanket. You've managed only a few moments of shallow rest, constantly interrupted by drafts that sneak beneath the door and the endless creaking of the beams overhead. You sit up slowly, the cold air rushing under the blanket as if it had been waiting for this moment. Your breath fogs instantly. Morning has arrived, but it hasn't brought warmth. There's no sun pouring in. The light that trickles through the wooden shutters is pale and weak, just enough to illuminate the outlines of the room. The stone walls seem even grayer now. You rub your arms through your cloak, but it doesn't help much. Every joint aches, and your skin feels dry and tight from the cold. You swing your feet to the floor, but the stone is brutal, unforgiving and sharp, as though it resents being stepped on. You hear footsteps outside. Someone passes, slowly. Maybe a servant, maybe another guest, just as disoriented. There's a brief pause, then the sound fades again. No words, no greetings. The castle in the morning is no livelier than it was the night before. Just colder, just quieter. You open the door, and the hallway greets you with another blast of damp air. The door groans on its hinges. It takes a moment before it agrees to stay open. You step out into the corridor. Your footsteps echo softly, then vanish into the hush. The castle doesn't feel like it's waking. It feels like it never really slept. Everything is still. You pass another window slit, and again the wind reaches in like a thief. You stop for a moment to brace yourself, then move toward the stairs. You descend carefully, one cold, worn step at a time, hand brushing the stone wall for balance. When you return to the lower level, you make your way back to the great hall. A few more people are here now, gathered near the hearth again. The fire has been stoked, but only just. It flickers weakly, the flames no bigger than your hand. A few logs sputter on the grate, sending occasional sparks that don't seem to warm anything beyond a few inches. You approach and find a space beside an elderly man wrapped in what must be every piece of fabric he owns. He doesn't look at you, just sits and stares into the flames, lips moving silently. You crouch nearby, but you don't feel warmer. The fire is more ritual than reality, a performance of warmth, not the real thing. You glance around the room again. A young kitchen boy walks past with a wooden bucket. A woman follows him, adjusting her linen cap with stiff fingers. Everyone looks gray, not just in clothing but in mood, in energy. They move like sleepwalkers, not startled by the cold, but worn down by it. You walk slowly down the corridor, unsure where to go next. The castle doesn't offer much in the way of direction or invitation. There are no signs, no markings, no welcoming doors. Every path looks the same: gray stone, heavy beams, faint drafts sneaking through mortar lines. You pass narrow slits in the wall that function as windows, but they offer no view, just more cold air and the sound of distant wind. The torch sconces remain unlit, their iron claws gripping darkness like it belongs there. You round a corner and hear voices ahead, soft, tired, not unfriendly, but not enthusiastic either. As you approach, you realize it's not a conversation. It's just people existing in shared space. Someone sighs, someone coughs, someone adjusts a bundle of cloth on their shoulder. You step into the room and find yourself in what might be called a common area, though there's little common about it beyond necessity. It's a narrow chamber with uneven walls and a low ceiling that forces you to duck slightly near the beams. A few stools line one wall. A child sits on one, idly chewing the end of a stick. A servant, young but with lines of fatigue in her face, kneels nearby with a worn broom, brushing straw into a pile so slowly it might be a form of meditation. She doesn't look up when you enter. None of them do. There's no privacy in the castle, not really. Every space is shared, and walls don't soften sound. If you speak above a whisper, half the corridor hears it. If you try to sleep, the snores and murmurs of others become your lullaby. You glance toward the far end of the room where a young man sits, turn toward the wall trying to read something by the weak light of the slit window. He's wrapped in a cloak and has hunched into himself so tightly, it looks like he's trying to disappear into the stone. You begin to understand how deeply woven together everything is in this place. People's lives overlap, tangle, press against one another like straw on a mattress. There are no quiet retreats, no locked doors, no my space. You're always seen, always heard, always in someone's way. A woman walks past you in the corridor just beyond, her wooden shoes clacking against the stone. She carries a wicker basket piled high with damp linens. She glances at you without curiosity and keeps moving. The way people look here isn't unfriendly. It's just tired, as if every moment of interaction costs more energy than it's worth. You lean against the wall and feel the cold seep into your back. The chill here is like background radiation. It's in everything. The clothes, the benches, the air, even the people. You've stopped expecting to be warm. You're adjusting to a new scale of comfort, one where being less cold feels like a small victory. To your skin and settles deep in your bones. It's not just cold, it's alive somehow. You try to imagine sleeping here. You try to imagine spending a week here, then a month, then years. A servant shuffles by with a bundle of kindling under his arm, eye downcast. Another follows him, carrying what looks like a stained bucket. The corridor beyond them vanishes into darkness. Somewhere in the distance, you hear a dog bark, and then a door slam. Then silence. The kind of silence that isn't peaceful, but heavy, like the castle itself is waiting for something. You stand still, letting it all soak in. The walls close in tighter than they seemed from outside. The air presses harder. The stone seems less noble now, more oppressive. This isn't a grand castle, this is a cage of centuries. And you're inside it. You stand again and walk slowly around the room. The door doesn't fully shut. There's a gap where the wood has warped, and it swings gently with each gust of wind. The ceiling groans overhead, wooden beams flexing as the air pressure shifts. Somewhere above, you hear a faint scratching sound. Rats probably, or squirrels nesting in the rafters. You shiver again. Not from fear exactly, but from the growing certainty that comfort is simply not part of this world. You move to the wall and press your hand against it. It's as cold as ice. You imagine sleeping here on a January night with snow piled outside and nothing but that thin blanket for cover. You try to imagine not just visiting this place, but living here, every winter, for years. You try to block out the cold by closing your eyes, but it doesn't help. Your skin still prickles. You can feel the wind working its way beneath your clothes. Feel the sting of raw fingers, the way your nose starts to run just to stay warm. It's the kind of cold that doesn't shock anymore. It seeps in, slowly, steadily, until it becomes part of you. There's a reason people wore layers upon layers in medieval times. Wool, linen, furs, cloaks. But even then it wasn't enough. Children froze in their sleep. The elderly didn't make it to spring. And even the wealthiest nobles couldn't insulate themselves completely. You remember stories about kings sleeping with dogs, not for affection but for warmth. You notice that there's no rug on the floor, no tapestries on the walls, nothing to trap heat or deaden the sound. Just cold, bare stone. It isn't neglect. It's design. Stone was meant to last, not to comfort. These castles were fortresses, not homes. You think of modern insulation, central heating, thermostats, heated floors, double-glazed windows. Then you look back around this bare chamber and realize there's not even a cushion. Every comfort you've known is absent here. Not missing. Absent. Unimagined. You glance toward the window again, where the shutter still rattles faintly. Even the wind feels different here. Older, maybe. It whistles through the stone, thin and high-pitched, like a whisper that never ends. You sit on the edge of the bed again, wrapping the cloak tighter. There's nowhere to lean that isn't cold. No surface that doesn't sting a little when touched. Even the air feels hard. And yet, people lived. Slept. Had children. Laughed, maybe. You try to picture it, but it's hard to imagine joy surviving this place, let alone thriving. If there was laughter here, it must have been brief and muffled by the wind. If there was peace, it came only with exhaustion. You exhale, and the breath rises like smoke. You lie back slowly, bracing against the cold rush of the mattress and pull the wool blanket over yourself. It's not enough. You already know it won't be enough. You close your eyes anyway, and the castle, as always, keeps breathing. There's a smell of smoke and damp wool, of stale air and boiled cabbage. You notice it more now than you did yesterday. Your senses feel clearer, but you almost wish they didn't. Someone coughs into a sleeve nearby. The sound echoes too clearly. You spot a bench near the side wall and sit again, the wood hard and splintery beneath you. You try to imagine staying here for weeks, being trapped by snow or siege, day after day with nothing to break the cold silence but chores, duty, repetition. The castle is enormous, but there's nowhere to go. The hall, the stairs, the room, the hearth. All of it loops together like a slow circle with no variation. You notice something else now too. The silence isn't total. It's layered. There's the muffled murmur of voices behind closed doors, the low clank of something metallic, the sudden caw of crows beyond the walls. You can't see the world outside, but you know it's there, just as cold, just as gray. You wonder how long it will be before the sun climbs high enough to cast any real light through the tiny windows. You wonder if it ever really does. You stand again, more from restlessness than purpose, and start walking toward the far side of the hall. The air gets colder again, just a few steps from the hearth. The warmth never travels. It just hovers where it is, like something hoarded. The walls remain unchanged, bare, gray, solid. Not a single tapestry to soften the echo, not a painting to distract the eye. You try to picture what the castle looked like centuries ago when it was new. Maybe there were brighter colors then. Maybe the fire roared. Maybe laughter really did fill this room once, or maybe it didn't. Maybe the past is just as hard as the present here. Maybe nothing's changed but the people walking the halls. You find yourself back at the door to the corridor. The draft pulls at you again. The castle breathes in its own slow rhythm, unchanged by you, uncaring of your comfort. It exhales frost and silence, and you are still inside. A young servant boy comes into the room carrying a bucket of water. He sets it down with care and glances nervously around before darting out again. You hear him retreat down the hallway, his footsteps quick and uncertain. You wonder what his day looks like, how early he woke, how many trips he's made, how often he's told not to be seen or heard. His world is this castle, and nothing beyond it. Someone in the room sneezes. No one reacts. You see another figure curled near the wall, maybe asleep, maybe ill. It's hard to tell the difference here. Their cloak is pulled high, face turned inward, a human bundle wedged between stone and air. You wonder how often illness sweeps through these halls. How many fevers pass quietly. How many coughs echo too long. You step forward, moving toward a door on the opposite side of the room. As you pass the broom-wielding girl, she finally looks up. Just for a moment. Her eyes are large and tired, framed by wisps of hair escaping a linen coif. She doesn't speak. She just looks. And then she returns to her work, her hand moving rhythmically, sweeping straw in silence. You open the door gently and find another hallway behind it, long, narrow, undecorated. You're not even sure what part of the castle you're in anymore. It's a maze of cold paths and quiet labor. You could be anywhere. You could be nowhere. As you walk, you hear muffled words through a door on your left. The voices are close but indistinct, private, but not hidden. You keep walking. A few steps later, the scent of boiled something reaches you. Cabbage? Turnip? It's hard to tell. It's not inviting. It's just food. Sustenance. Nothing more. You pass another door that's been left ajar and glance inside. A small chamber, a few rough cots, a pile of firewood stacked against the far wall but no fire. Someone's cloak hangs from a wooden peg, still damp from the morning frost. It's a snapshot of castle life in its most honest form. Functional, unpolished, bare. You close the door gently and keep walking. The castle doesn't change. It doesn't react to you. It simply is. Massive, unfeeling, and constant. And in its silence, it teaches you something simple. Comfort is a modern idea. Here, survival is the closest thing to luxury. You walk without thinking now, following the next corridor, then the next like water through old plumbing. You've stopped expecting relief. The cold isn't something you fight anymore. It's something you wear. A second skin of damp air and stone breath. The castle, for all its grandeur from a distance, is a warren of discomfort up close. Eventually, the walls widen around you, and you find yourself at the chapel. The arched door stands slightly open. You push it gently, and it creaks with a sound like stretched leather. Inside, the space is dim but calm. The ceiling vaults high overhead, ribbed with stone and dark with soot. Narrow stained glass windows filter pale winter light, painting faint ribbons of blue and red across the cold floor. The colors are dull, clouded with centuries of grime, but they still feel like the most beautiful thing you've seen all day. There are no pews, just rough benches, their wood warped and splintered. At the far end stands an altar, simple and undecorated, a stone slab topped with a single iron candlestick. The candle is unlit. There's no one here. You sit on one of the benches. The wood creaks. You half expect it to collapse beneath you like so much else in this place. But it holds. The silence here is different from the silence of the halls. Less hostile, less expectant. Still cold, still gray, but somehow gentler. Maybe that's why the people of this place clung so hard to faith. Not because of ceremony or grandeur, but because this room, for all its bleakness, is one of the few where something other might be allowed to exist. Your breath fogs again. You watch it rise like incense. On the wall behind the altar, there's a crude painting. Saints or angels or knights, it's hard to tell. The figures are faded, their halos worn, their faces vague with time. But someone painted them. Someone cared enough to believe this place needed beauty, even if just a flicker. You wonder how many feet have shuffled through this space, how many knees have bent on the frozen floor, how many prayers were whispered with numb lips, with blistered hands clasped tight. Not just grand requests for health or rain or victory, but smaller, harder ones. Warmth, bread, mercy. Eventually you stand. The stillness was welcome, but it begins to feel like another kind of weight. You step back out into the corridor and let the chapel door close behind you. You move upward again. The stairs spiral, narrow and steep, meant for defense, not convenience. Your legs ache, your breath comes faster, and still, there's more castle above. At the top of the steps, a door opens onto the battlements. You step into the wind, like stepping into a wave. It hits hard, sharp, thin, relentless. The view should be spectacular, and it is in a way. Endless hills, distant smoke curling from village chimneys, fields frozen into pale gold and brown patches. But there's no romance left in the scene, just distance, cold and unreachable. The wind howls past your ears, pulling at your cloak. The crenellations cast long shadows over the stone walkway. You can picture archers pacing here, watching for threats. You can picture servants hauling buckets of snowmelt up from below to pour into barrels. The work never stopped, not even up here. Especially not up here. Your fingers are too stiff to linger. The stones beneath your feet are slick with frost, and the idea of slipping, a tumble down a narrow stairwell alone and unseen, feels too plausible to ignore. You retreat back down. As you descend, the castle seems to settle again. A low groan from the beams, a clunk somewhere below. The sounds of age. You pass another corridor lined with small doors. Chambers, maybe, or storage. You don't investigate. You've seen enough to understand the rhythm now. Every room is a version of the last. Cold, hard, necessary. Back in the lower hall, you spot the steward again. He glances your way but says nothing. You return the look. There's a kind of understanding now. You're not a guest here. You're part of the system, if only briefly. You don't know how long you've been inside the castle. Hours, at least. It could be more. Time bends here, stretches thin between echoes. You find a bench near the main hearth, the same one as before. The fire's still smoldering, barely alive. You sit and watch it for a while, the smoke curling up into the dim beams. Your toes are numb. Your back aches. The wool blanket from earlier is a memory your skin won't let go of. The castle breathes around you. Still cold, still massive, still waiting. And you understand now, not just how people lived here, but that they lived. Not easily, not comfortably, but entirely. You don't remember falling asleep, but you must have. When your eyes open again, the hall is darker than before. The fire has burned lower, barely a flicker now, just a dim orange pulse in the hearth, like the heartbeat of something sleeping deep beneath the stone. The cold is worse. Your muscles ache from being still too long. You shift, and your joints crack like old timber. You glance around, and for a moment you think the hall is empty. But then you see them. A figure by the wall, another near the door. Silent. Still. Wrapped in cloaks or blankets. People who, like you, have given up fighting the cold and now simply endure it. There's a sound. A dull thunk from somewhere above. A shutter banging. Or maybe just the castle sighing again in its sleep. You stand slowly, the bench creaking beneath you. The room feels unfamiliar now. Not changed exactly, just more itself. Every corner swallowed by shadow, every surface breathing cold. You half expect to see frost on the stones. You half expect your breath to rise and not return. You step into the corridor again. Your boots are quieter now. You've learned how to walk softer here, how not to echo too loudly, how not to disturb what doesn't want disturbing. A torch guttering in an iron sconce casts a weak light, enough to guide you back to the chamber where you tried to rest earlier. It's not warm, but it's a kind of shelter. The blanket is still there. The wind still slides through the door, and the shutter still trembles on its latch. But it's your cold now. Familiar. You lie back down, and this time, the straw doesn't feel quite as sharp. The smell doesn't hit quite as hard. You fold the blanket over yourself and close your eyes. You dream, or maybe don't. Maybe the castle dreams instead. Of centuries passing, of footsteps and fires and endless winters, and in that strange space between sleep and waking, you realize this place is not built to comfort. It's built to survive. Everything you thought a castle would be, grand, majestic, imposing, was never for people like you. The stories lied. This isn't the home of fantasy kings. This is the shell people built to endure a world that did not care if they froze or starved or disappeared. And somehow they did endure. The thought settles in your chest like an ember. The castle creaks again. The wind returns. And you, wrapped in thin wool and ancient silence, let the dark carry you a little farther in. The morning doesn't arrive with sunlight. It arrives with noise. Somewhere in the courtyard someone yells. Hooves clatter. Metal scrapes. You stir awake not because you're rested, but because the castle insists. It doesn't wait for anyone to feel ready. Life here begins when it must. You pull yourself up slowly, the blanket sliding off with a damp whisper. The chill hasn't eased. In fact, it feels colder than ever. The kind of cold that seeps in deeper because you've stopped trying to resist it. Your limbs are stiff, your eyes bleary. You'd hoped for rest, but what you got was pause. Downstairs, the castle is already awake. Or rather, it never really slept. People are moving now. You hear boots on stone, voices muttering, a bucket sloshing. A dog barks and then yelps, scolded maybe or startled. You follow the sounds. In the courtyard, morning chores have begun. A stable boy is sweeping muck with a bundle of twigs bound into a makeshift broom. Another hauls buckets of water, slipping slightly on the frost-slicked ground. His breath puffs out in clouds, his nose red and raw. A third boy chops wood with rhythmic, exhausted thuds, his sleeves rolled back despite the cold. The logs are wet, splitting reluctantly. No one is talking unless they have to. That's what strikes you. This isn't a bustling social scene, it's endurance. Everyone here is just trying to get through the day. You pass a woman carrying a tray of bread, dense gray loaves the size of bricks. Her fingers are bare, blue at the knuckles. You want to help her, say something, but there's no space for niceties here. Everyone has their role, and yours is still uncertain. The kitchen door swings open briefly as someone exits, releasing a burst of sour heat. You catch a glimpse inside. Low ceilings, blackened stone, copper pots hanging from hooks. A boy stirs something thick and gray in a cauldron. It smells like boiled cabbage and desperation. You hear a shout from the wall walk, soldiers exchanging shifts. One climbs stiffly down a ladder, rubbing his arms. He looks like he hasn't slept in days. His armor is dented. His boots are cracked. He nods at you as he passes, but his eyes are dull. Not unkind, just used up. You find a small alcove by the well and stand there for a while, trying not to be in the way. You watch as the castle moves through its grim, methodical dance. Everything here is effort. Every task takes longer, requires more bodies, more strength. Nothing is simple. Even lighting a fire takes time, kindling, patience. There's no glamour in castle life. There's mud and smoke and work that never quite ends. And you start to understand something deeper. These people aren't just cold. They're tired, not from a single night, but from every day before this one. From the weight of the walls, the chill of the wind, the endless repetition of tasks that don't change with the seasons. You wonder what joy looks like here. If it exists, it must be small and hidden. A bite of fresh bread, a moment by the fire, a dry pair of socks. You imagine someone laughing once, just once, at a shared joke in the kitchens. That memory probably lasted them weeks. You shift your weight, and the cold bites through your boots. The sun is rising now, barely a smear of pale yellow behind the clouds. It brings no warmth, just light. A different way to see the same cold world. Somewhere nearby, a bell rings. Time to begin again. You're sent to help carry supplies from the storeroom. And it's the kind of assignment that sounds simple until you understand what storeroom means in a medieval castle. It isn't neatly labeled shelves and clean sacks of grain. It's a stone vault beneath the keep, damp, dark, and older than memory. The stairwell leading down is narrow, spiral, and slick with moisture. You descend carefully, gripping a rope that's been bolted into the wall, frayed from use, stiff with age. The further you go, the less air seems to exist. It's not that it smells bad, it's that it barely smells at all. Just cold, just earth. At the bottom, the door sticks. You push harder, and it creaks open with a groan that echoes like thunder in the confined space. The air that escapes smells like rot and iron. You can't tell if it's the scent of spoiled goods or just the scent of time left alone too long. Inside, it's not pitch black. There's a single oil lamp hanging from a hook, its flame barely clinging to life. You glance around. Shelves sag beneath the weight of sacks and jars. Everything is covered in a fine film of dust. The walls are sweating, the stones so wet they almost shine. You run your fingers along the edge of a barrel. It's sticky, not with syrup or honey, something less identifiable. You wipe your hand on your cloak and keep moving. A servant joins you. He doesn't speak, just hands you a wicker basket and points to a bin filled with root vegetables, turnips, beets, and carrots, each one twisted, shrunken, dirt still clinging to their skins. You load them carefully, watching your breath swirl in the air. There's no warmth down here, only the soft sound of wood creaking and water dripping somewhere unseen. You move on to dried meats. Salted slabs hang from hooks. Some are hard as stone, others too soft. The servant cuts a few down with a dull blade and drops them into a sack. He ties it tight with rough twine, then hands it to you with a nod. Your arms ache as you climb the stairs again. The basket digs into your side. The sack bruises your thigh with every step. But the moment you emerge back into the daylight, if you can call it that, you feel almost relieved. The dampness below was heavier than the cold above. It clung to your bones in a different way. You hand off the food to a woman in the kitchen who barely looks up. She grunts her thanks and disappears through a curtain of heavy cloth. You're left alone again, with numb fingers and sore shoulders and the unmistakable sense that the day has only just begun. A boy rushes past with a bundle of firewood, nearly tripping. Someone else chases a goose that's escaped its pen. A door slams somewhere in the barracks. The castle hums with low, continuous motion, noisy but never chaotic. Everyone knows their job, even if that job is miserable. You notice a man scrubbing a cloak in a shallow basin, his hands red to the wrist. The water is gray and slushy, and the soap, what little of it there is, barely foams. He glances at you briefly before returning to his task. You wonder how often clothes are cleaned. Judging by the smell that clings to every hallway, not often. Cleanliness isn't a virtue here. It's a luxury. You sit for a moment on a stone step, your legs throbbing from effort. The wind hasn't let up. It snakes through the courtyard, tugging at cloaks and stinging cheeks. You pull yours tighter, but it's already lost most of its warmth. Someone's sharpening a blade nearby, the rhythm of stone against steel like a heartbeat. You watch, mesmerized for a moment, as sparks catch and fall like tiny fireflies, burning out before they hit the ground. You're learning the rhythms of the place, not just the work, but the silence between it, the grunts, the nods, the few words that get exchanged, quick, necessary, rarely kind. The castle isn't cruel, but it's not kind either. It's indifferent. It's the wind and the stone and the bone-deep cold of a world that doesn't care how tired you are. It will still ask more of you tomorrow, and somehow the people here meet that demand. You rise again, stretching your stiff arms. There's more to do. Always more. That's what life is here. Not comfort, not ease. Just one more chore before the dark.